Hello and welcome to an interview from MinnMax. I'm Ben Hansen. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. And thanks to your support, thanks to the community support, we hit a goal on Patreon, which allowed us to create our interview show. And this is the first interview show we're doing. And so with our interview show, we're going to be releasing these on YouTube. But if you want to unlock the podcast version of it, listen to this audio at your own leisure, you can support us at the $5 tier at patreon.com/MinnMax2Ns. You unlock this interview, all previous interviews, because we've had some kind of pseudo interviews, and then all future interviews, also early access to the MinnMax show, MinnFacts, our exclusive Q&A podcast every single week, and the Deepest Dive, which is our huge community game club. So please support us there if you'd like the podcast version of this. But with our interview show here, we're branching out beyond games, which is very exciting. Obviously, games are still at the heart of what we do. We want to have a lot of game developers and designers on in the future. But with this first one, I'm very excited to say we're going to be interviewing Phil Tippett. Phil Tippett is a visual effects legend, Oscar award-winning figure in Hollywood, the man responsible for many things from your childhood, crazy lasting legacy. Designed Jabba, designed the Tauntauns, animated the Walkers in Empire Strikes Back, the Holochess set in Star Wars, Starship Troopers, Ed 209 from RoboCop. Obviously, his work in Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is my favorite film of all time, and specifically the making of Jurassic Park that released in the 90s with James Earl Jones walking through this museum. That is the behind-the-scenes video that I think set me on this path in my life to both want to be a video producer and to highlight the creative work of people. And Phil Tippett was a huge part of that interview and that video in the 90s. So it's a real honor to have Phil Tippett help launch our interview show here at MinnMax. And so the goal with the interviews moving into the future is we want to talk to smart people and ask them new questions. That's all we're doing here. So thanks to your support on Patreon, we get to talk to Phil Tippett. We get to learn from Phil Tippett. So without further ado, here's the legend. Phil Tippett, welcome to MinnMax, sir.
Thanks.
It's an honor to have you. What's your life like these days? How you doing over there?
Like everybody else's, I'm just kind of sequestered and using the time to develop other projects and designing stuff and just keeping busy.
Do you feel like it's helpful to take a break, to slow down and reassess, what's important creatively for you?
No, I pretty much do the same thing that I've been doing since I was 8 years old. So, it's just, I just put in, 8 to 10 hours a day, working on different, projects. I pretty much wrapped up shooting this Mad God project that's just taken forever to do. So that's all in post-production and sound and music are being worked on. And we're just doing final composites. And Alamo Drafthouse is going to release it once the pandemic's over with. And I'm going to probably, get in touch with Netflix and see if there's any options there. But
that's awesome.
Down the road a bit.
What has the Mad God experience taught you about the industry that maybe you didn't know before?
Well, it's totally outside of the industry.
Yeah.
It's just, in fact, it's my avoidance of the industry, which I totally fed up with. So it's my, option to just do something that's unique and that I've, wanted to do that explores like other potential narratives outside the normal, theatrical 3-act structure.
What have you learned about like the audience that gravitates towards it though? Is there a hardcore, passionate Mad God fan base out there? I mean, has it taught you anything just about the world?
There's a lot of followers on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. Or I actually don't do Facebook, but there's a lot of followers. But we'll see. It's got to get released, and then we'll see if it can find an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious what you think about this time that we're in. I've heard you in other interviews kind of rail against how Hollywood's a bunch of old men complaining about the younger generation. I'm curious what you think about the quarantine and kind of the do-it-yourself aspect out there. Do you go online? Do you follow other creative projects, people making fan films, even stop motion during this time? Are you encouraged by that kind of mentality in the world today?
No, I really don't follow that much stuff. I'm kind of busy working on my own stuff. There's a small group of people that I stay in touch with that are, doing stop motion and other films. I mean, friends with Don Hertzfeldt. So, we stay in touch. So there's like a actually very small community of people that I circulate around, but, I pretty much stay within that corral.
Yeah. No interest in going online and having people tweet
No,
at you
that's
like,
just a big time suck. So I'd rather spend my time, working on things.
yeah. What you say, Mad God's your attempt to avoid the industry. What are you hoping to avoid? What's your frustration with the industry these days?
Well, it's not an attempt. I'm just doing it. I mean, it's, what I wanted to do is not pitchable, to a studio. It's too unique, and Hollywood doesn't know how to deal with unique things. So, I mean, I spent many years, 10 or 12 years, trying to develop, projects. And, I could get into any studio I want and pitch things, but I always got the 1,000-yard stare. It's just nobody knew what to do with me. And at some point, Ed Neumeyer, my buddy that wrote Starship Troopers and RoboCop, said, "It's the problem with your projects is they're art damaged." And, meaning art films, and art films don't make money. So, studios stay way away from them. So when Kickstarter was hot, I funded the first 3. I did them in episodes or, chapters, and I funded the first 3 through Kickstarter, and that became too cumbersome to do, and really, in the end of it, wasn't worth it. The kind of air got let over the tires of Kickstarter, and I was able to find a backer that was able to give me completion funds to finish the thing. So that's kind of where we're at now.
That's interesting. I think it's really fascinating to think of you going for a more art film approach, and then also George Lucas. I mean, he's sequestered away, but it seems like he's interested in making more experimental artistic films overall as well. Like, what do you think?
Well, he's been saying that for years. I mean, that remains to be seen. I mean, the question is, if you're used to drinking the good wine, can you go back to the cheap stuff?
Do you think he can?
What's that?
Do you think he can?
I have no idea. He hasn't yet.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll never know. Maybe they'll be locked away in a bunker. But what do you think is the right level of success for a creative person? What's the healthiest level to stop at, and just to have the most pure expression of your art?
I don't know. I mean, I think, once you've achieved the, success, that Lucas has, I mean, it kind of puts you in a box in a way, and you're kind of doomed to expectation. So, that really necessitates, I mean, if he wants to go out and do more experimental stuff, he'll probably disappoint a lot of people, depending upon what it is, because they'll want the same old thing out of George. And, if he does something unique, he'll be pilloried for it, but, maybe find a following for it, but it remains to be seen. He's got to do it first.
Yeah. How often do you feel those fan expectations?
None at all, because I don't care. I just, there's stuff that I want to do, and I'll do it, and I'll put it out there, and people can take it or leave it.
That seems like a very healthy approach overall. I mean, what are your thoughts on Hollywood these days in the age of COVID? I mean, do you feel like it's just an interesting time for the entire industry to reassess, or you just checked out, you're going to do your own thing, and you don't really want to follow current trends and that too much anymore?
I know. I mean, everything has changed, but when and if things get back to normal, things don't change that much. Hollywood would go back to doing the same, general formulaic stuff, and we'll be entertained by interesting stuff, and interesting filmmakers will always be doing stuff. But Hollywood is Hollywood, and it's kind of a mutual admiration society. So
yeah,
or a club. So, I kind of take the position of Groucho Marx, is that I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as its member.
Seems like a good philosophy overall. You say you can get in pitch with anybody, but then in terms of actually funding, it's a whole other thing. Like, what do you think is Hollywood's or the studio's vision of you? Do you think it's almost like, oh, well, there's a weird messaging beat of kind of anti-CG? I think like George Miller with the latest Mad Max, and even J.J. Abrams with the latest Star Wars is like, hey, we're going to have some practical effects here. And the community is all for it. But do you feel like their money isn't where their mouth is, and they just would like to, have you in for a meeting, but then when it comes to actually being practical and actually leaning into the past a little bit more, they're not interested in it?
No, I mean, I think some people actually, prefer, practical stuff because it gives you a different quality, different look, than, boilerplate CG stuff. And, Favreau's reached out to me. We're going to be doing some stuff for the second season of Mandalorian, and then they want to do something for the third season once things adjust back to whatever they're going to adjust back to.
Yeah. How does that feel when somebody reaches out to you to want to create more Star Wars content?
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I kind of been there, done that, but, a lot of the guys that I work with, it's really exciting for them because they kind of missed the boat. They were, kids when, Star Wars and RoboCop and all that stuff came out, and that's what they wanted to do, was do practical stuff, but they missed that boat and, became digital artists. And the Mad God Project, gave them a opportunity to, work with me on doing photographic work and stop motion animation and such. And so, with this Mandalorian stuff, the small group of people, under a half dozen, but that are, really interested in doing, working. I have a stage where I've been shooting Mad God. And so we've got like all the lights and all the equipment, so we can just set up, anything we want anytime. So we're in the process of building some, props for it right now. And in the next couple of months, we'll shoot.
That's awesome. But it just feels like another day at the office for you. It just feels like more work. You don't have a tingle, butterflies in your stomach when you're going back to the world of Star Wars?
No, I really don't think about the past that much, and I'm kind of like to move on. I was like Star Wars, I was over with space aliens, and RoboCop over with robots, and Jurassic Park over with dinosaurs, and Starship Troopers over with giant bugs. So, it starts to limit the playing field. So I just, centering more on what is of interest to me, which is a lot more, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it's one of the reasons I couldn't go asking for money, because I couldn't even begin to tell anybody what it was about.
Just something a little more raw and dark, and I think tone poem you've called it before?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, right on. So, I mean, you stay pretty separated from nerd culture. You have no interest in going to like a Comic-Con or engaging with the fans these days. I mean, how often does it come up? I mean, when you're giving your ID to somebody in an airport, do people be like, oh, let's talk Star Wars? Is it a big recurring thing in your life?
That's happened a few times before. I mean, it was kind of an amusing thing years ago. We were working on the Spiderwick Chronicles, and my studio, Tippett Studio, and ILM were both working on it. So we would go down and have meetings in LA. And we were coming back through the Burbank airport, and one of the TSA guys looked at my ID and goes, "Oh, you're Phil Tippett." And then when I went through the scanners and whatnot, the guy who said to his TSA buddies, "Hey, buddy, come over here. This is Phil Tippett, and he did like the Walkers and the Jabba the Hutt, and blah, blah, blah." And they were like all excited. And there were maybe a half dozen of them. And, about 30 feet away, the ILM guys were standing there waiting for me to, go get on the airplane. And I said, "Hey, see those guys down there? They worked on all the new Star Wars things. Maybe you want to talk to them." And they were like, "No, all that stuff's bullshit.
Must be terrible for them. I mean, there's a weird trend online of people obsessed with sharing theater reactions recently, you know, with the latest Avengers movies, Marvel stuff, and maybe it's like during this time as well, it's really satisfying just to hear a giant group really react in a big way. I'm curious if you could go back, like what theater reaction would you want to have a recording of? What was the most interesting theater reaction you've ever been a part of?
Oh boy, I was lucky enough to be, work on a lot of movies that had, really positive responses. I mean, for Star Wars, the cast and crew screening that we did, I mean, everybody was just totally shocked. I mean, we were working on the visual effects, and I was involved with a very tiny part of it at the very, very end, and what I knew about Star Wars was, my buddy Dennis Murin and Ken Ralston were working on it, and I would go, they were on the night crew, and I'd go visit them for dinner and met Joe Johnston and, Lauren Peterson, a bunch of the guys that are going to work on Empire with. And it was like really, quite cool. And then, George hired us to do the chess set and the cantina scene. And, ran us the scenes that he was working on. I was like, oh, this is like really great. This is exactly what we wanted to do as kids. And we finally got the opportunity. And then seeing it, there was amazing. And same thing with, RoboCop or Jurassic Park and, Starship Troopers, their audiences respond really well.
Yeah. With that first Star Wars screening, the lore, the mythologized version of it is that Spielberg was one of the only ones now in the screening to be like, oh no, I see where this is going, even though it was unfinished. The idea that like, I see once all the special effects and music are in there, this is going to be huge. Was that the screening you're talking about, or was that a later screening that you were at where people all got it in the theater?
The final print, one of the final prints. It was in I think Westwood, and it was the cast and crew screening there, and then George or Fox threw a big lunch afterwards, and I mean from the first frames, the Star Destroyer coming in, I mean everybody was just agog.
Yeah, I heard in another interview that you did, you talked about how some of the VFX guys were like, you might want to go buy some stock in Fox before this movie hits.
Yeah, they did. A bunch of them did, and made some money. I didn't. Stupidly enough, I didn't have a clue about doing that.
Did you have that good of a feeling though, where it was a possibility, but it's like, that just seems like a weird thing to do?
I just never tracked anything like the stocks before. I mean, I was like really young. I was, in my early 20s, so I didn't even think about stuff like that.
Right. With the Holochess and the Holochess design, how many conversations were there early on about the rules of the game? Was it just, let's just have something that looks really fun, and then if people want to piece something together, so be it?
Well, I mean, it came about almost as an accident because Lucas, we were doing the cantina masks, and George realized that I did stop motion animation, and that gave him the idea to do the chess set as a stop motion thing, because Michael Crichton had just come out with Future World and did a holographic, kind of a chess set with knights and stuff with live actors. And George was going to do that with the cantina characters, masks and whatnot. But Crichton had kind of scooped him. So, he decided he wanted to do it with stop motion. And I mean, it was all done really quickly, right at the end of the schedule, almost as an afterthought.
Yeah. So there was no time to debate what is actually going on here.
Oh, no. I mean, he said, can you make 10 stop motion space aliens in a couple of weeks? And John Berg and I did, and we brought them into the studio in a cardboard box, and Dennis Murin set up the cameras and the animation table, and George came in, and he just kind of, he asked him, so what do you want? And he just kind of improvised and just said, well, this little yellow guy hops in here, and this green guy picks him up and throws him on the ground here, and all the other guys are watching. And that was the direction.
That's perfect. That's all you need.
He just made it up.
And now, of course, because it's Star Wars, there are like official rules. I think you can play it on some mobile apps and stuff like that. It's a
Right.
weird world out there. Do you follow any of that, or it's just
No, not at all. Well, I was involved with some guys wanting to do a Holochess thing, a similar thing. Used a bunch of my designs for it, and I have no idea what happened to that.
huh? That's odd.
I never saw any money out of it, so it's like a lot of ventures just probably crashed and burned.
Was it like a Lucasfilm thing, or?
Oh no! It was some independent place.
Oh, they wanted to take the characters and create their own spin-off
Well,
game or
not
something.
the Star Wars characters, but they couldn't do that. But they used other designs that I had done over the years that I hadn't used for anything.
Gotcha.
So I wouldn't use that.
Yeah. Can we zoom in a bit? Can you talk about the origins of the Walkers with Empire Strikes Back? Obviously, with that film, you had a huge upgrade in your role and involvement. You want to talk about the earliest conversations about what you were going for there?
That was pretty much in the Joe Johnston and John Berg's court. John and I were living in Silver Lake, and Joe was in LA at the time after Star Wars. And, Joe was involved with mounting the ideas for the Walkers with George. And they went through a number of different, kinds of iterations. One of them was like wheeled vehicles that were going to be RC, and I don't recall what else, but it was pretty much Dennis Muren and I think Joe Johnston that convinced George to do it as stop motion because there's more control and we could do something more imaginative. So he bought that, and while we were in LA, John Berg worked on the prototype for the Walker, and then once ILM had gotten located in San Rafael, we moved up there and hired Tom Sanamon to do the final 3 Walker armatures, and the the model shop made all the carapace and whatnot under Joe's direction. And that's kind of how it went.
Yeah. Do you remember having discussions back then about the practicality of the design, like in a real world, having 4 legs on this thing slowly marching across? It's fun, but it's silly. Were there any conversations about that back in the day?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of experimenting. I mean, we had like the really early video playback thing, so that was really helpful. Initially, we used we'll use nature as the model for something, and so we started with an elephant, and Dennis and John Berg and I went out to a wild animal park and essentially did like Edward Muybridge tests or shots of elephant. I got a big chalk marker and marked up all of its joints. And then we did Dennis shot on 35 millimeter film the elephant, walking from left to right and then coming at you and then going away. And I put that up on the Moviola and just studied that. And we shot a few tests based on the elephant, and it was just didn't work because the scale was wrong. The elephant was too small and walkers were a lot bigger. So it took a number of iterations to figure out its footfall pattern, which, resolved into, it needed to have 3 feet of contact all the time and only one leg moving. And then the circulation of which leg moved next was important. So, we just built it up like that until we found it. I mean, the moves that we had to make were so incremental that you couldn't even use a surface gauge for some of them because they were so small. You just kind of had to feel them.
Yeah. And then the 2-legged walkers in the background at Empire, did you model any animals for that? Or was it just, it's a quick thing we can
No, that was just a throwaway thing that Joe and John and Tom Sanamon just threw together on the weekends and showed it to George. And he said, yeah, we'll put it in the movie. I mean, a bunch of stuff happened like that, like I'd be bored on a weekend or, was waiting for something, paint to dry or something. And I made a little kind of a pterodactyl thing with a little tiny stuffed alligator's head on it and showed it to George, and he said, "Oh, we'll put that in Yoda Swamp." And then the design for the Wampa initially was absolutely horrendous. It was just awful what they shot. It was like this big bug-eyed thing with like antennas that were made out of springs with like big red balls on it. It was unbelievable.
It was just from 50s sci-fi stuff.
Ridiculous it was. So I pleaded with George to like, let me do something different. And he went, "Yeah, okay, fine, just don't take too much time."
And then you wanted to create something with the Wampa that was a little more like natural in the environment overall, that fit with the tauntauns.
Stupid, at least. That looked threatening.
Right.
And so he said, "Yeah, if you can do it quickly." So I bashed something out in a couple of days, and we went out and got the editor, Paul Hirsch, to come out and just make sure it was going to cut with, because we hadn't seen that cut. Oh, no, actually we had, but I just wanted to double check and make sure that, it would be the best, we get the right take for editorial. And we just spent the morning shooting it. We kind of had to wait. We had to shoot in the morning and make sure the day was overcast because there were clouds in the background. And we just, the practical puppet, and we did like maybe a dozen takes. And
yeah.
George picked one.
Nice. I mean, how many of those stupid things do you think made the cut in Star Wars? Was there anything that was filmed that is actually released where you're like, man, I just think that thing is so stupid looking. We could have done a better job.
No, George was pretty good about, all of the stop motion stuff we did, we pretty much got in one take. The shot of one of the very early shots that I did with the Tauntaun coming up to the crest of a hill, and then you cut into Luke and the live action prop of the Tauntaun. I shot that. We were working really late nights because the lab was located in Washington, and so we couldn't get dailies back till 4:00 in the afternoon, and so we'd work all night long. And I did the first take, and we saw it in dailies the next day, and George said, "Okay, great." And it was terrible. It was really awful. And so I had to kind of plead with him to do a retake. And he said, "Okay, we'll just do one retake, and see if you can make it better." And so I did, and thank God it was better. But things kind of work like that. I mean, for other films that we worked on, say like Willow or whatnot, you do a lot of filling in. And George would, come up, as they're, editing the film towards the very end and say, "Hey, can you throw something together really quickly and, shoot it?" And it was like that, like this, I think it was in Willow, there were these eggs that ended up turning into the two-headed fire-breathing thing. And the eggs had to hatch, and you need like some interstitial kind of a thing of what came out of the eggs. And so those were done like really quickly at the end. One of them was just, some stop motion, I don't know what they were, like octopusy spiny things that break out of the egg. That was literally thrown together in an afternoon and then shot that afternoon. And then we built a hand puppet of two, of the dragon heads, and shot that. So stuff like that would happen, quite frequently, generally at the end of the schedule.
Yeah, there's something kind of liberating about it. Just do it fast, and then now it's standing the test of time.
Yeah, and George was really good about that. He didn't, you never had to do like, with a lot of projects, people that don't know jack shit have to, be involved in this decision-making process. And so they make you jump through a bunch of hoops and you design a bunch of stuff. And then they go like, well, let's use the head of this and the tail of that and the blah, 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 blah. And it just, ends up, diminishing the effectiveness of any original design. And George would never do that. I mean, you come up with like a bunch of ideas, and he would pick one and say, that's the one I like. But he wouldn't dick you around with it.
That's nice. Yeah. What, like, I know you worked on the new Beauty and the Beast for a little bit and were pretty frustrated by that process. Are there other films that jumped to your mind for being the most frustrating experience for you overall?
Oh, handful of them, under a half dozen, and usually it's, when you don't really have production support. Although, I always found, producers to be like really supportive. And sometimes we'd all be in the same boat and, have a director that wasn't, quite up to speed. So, have to, work double time just to make sure he didn't run everything off the cliff.
Yeah, for sure. I heard you mention in an interview that, with like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, and maybe it branches out to everything, that you didn't want them to look real. The goal wasn't to make things with Go Motion look like reality. So there's a little bit charm in it looking unreal. Can you kind of expand on what you mean by that?
Well, in regard to Jurassic Park, I mean, the objective for all of that stuff, the stop motion stuff, was to make it as, believably real as possible. So that's why we developed the whole Go Motion, technique to integrate the stop motion characters more into the live action. And, and once computer graphics came around, that technique became obsolete. But, some of the tests we did on Jurassic Park very early on were really interesting. We would do some like, say, run cycles with the raptors and shoot them against green, and then send them over to ILM, and they would put post blurs on the stuff, and it looked really amazing. I mean, as good as the rendering was in Jurassic Park, this looked better by virtue of the fact that it was photographic. And, I don't think a lot of people really have the powers of observation to really notice that or really care, but I do. I just think it looks a lot better. And, but, there's a lot of other things that computer graphics allows you to do, and it's certainly the best path to take. And
yeah. Do you feel like if you would have gone with Go Motion with Jurassic Park, that the dinosaurs would have aged better? I mean, it still looks great to this day, but do you think Go Motion versus 1993 CG?
Oh, it remains to be seen. I mean, 1993 CG, Jurassic Park, and even Starship Troopers, even today they're unequaled. I don't know what, I kind of blame Peter Jackson, and all the whole Lord of the Rings thing that kind of took everything down a notch and made everything look more like video gaming, or how it just didn't, to me, look as good. But nobody cared, and things make a lot of money, so the industry just kind of gravitated that way.
Yeah. You say video gamey. Do you have any experience with video games? Have you ever been a fan of video games? I know it's kind of very fair to call some Hollywood films like, it feels like you're watching a video game here. But have you ever dabbled back in the day or kept up with any trends in the video game world?
No, not at all. Again, I played some of the really early games that were just, pretty darn funky, but kind of interesting. And I found myself up at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning going, what the hell am I doing here? So I just stopped doing that. But with my studio, I mean, we stay in touch with things, and there's a lot of, gaming engines and such that, we're interested in use aspects of. And, the technology is really amazing, what can be done with it, but I just, don't occupy my time.
Yeah, it's tough to keep up with everything, but there would be some amazing pieces of animation. I'm sure that would really impress you. But how often do you see animation out in the world or in media that kind of makes you do a double take?
I usually don't pay that much attention to it. I mean, I don't go see Pixar or Marvel movies, so I have nothing to say about that.
Yeah.
But on anything else, I mean, I usually, if it's a compelling narrative, I just get lost in that, and not that critical, of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, you're at one of the most pivotal moments in Hollywood history, like the moment when Spielberg sees the CG test and says, "All right, let's go CG over go motion for Jurassic Park." And you said, "I think I'm extinct." Is that how you remember it? You said that?
Yep.
Okay.
And he turned around immediately and said, "I'm going to put that in the movie."
How did that make you feel?
Well, I guess it's fine.
Okay, it wasn't like, "Oh man, I'm really salty about this."
Glad to help out.
Yeah, you're welcome to. We can take a break if you want to answer that or anything.
No, I'll call back later.
Okay.
Just let it peter out.
Or you can maybe cancel it.
Yeah, let me just turn off the noise.
You got it. It's such a weird moment thinking about, Spielberg loves old go motion probably almost as much as you do, right? So he's such a nostalgic guy too, but just came to this moment of him being a practical filmmaker, and it's like, hey, we got to make the best choice here. But did you sense much debate within him? Did you have a conversation with him about maybe we could still go motion, or in his mind he saw the test from ILM and said, this is a done deal here?
Well, I saw the test long before he did.
Oh, okay.
I'm friends with Dennis Murin. And, I realized that, the game was over for stop and go motion. So there was really no argument on my part. I just realized that was done for, visual effects, movies. It continued to have a life afterwards with, Tim Burton and Henry Selick and such, but for puppet films. But, that was about the only place it was ever going to go. So I made peace with that immediately.
Was it exciting for you to see Dennis and the team take off in such a way, or was it filled with dread, or like what were your emotions seeing those early tests then?
I've been very aware of, because of my friendship with Dennis. I mean, of the history of them doing characters with computer graphics, and he pulled me in for the Stained Glass Man, and have me put my eye on it and see if I have any ideas, or with the kind of water snake thing in the abyss. So I saw what they were doing and was certainly aware of the trajectory from Young Sherlock through Terminator 2, and then it was just Steve Williams and Mark DePay just took it upon themselves to prove that they could make an animal, and living, breathing animal, and they did, and so the rest is history.
Yeah. But then they kept you on because you knew so much about animation and knew so much about animating dinosaurs in particular. You kind of be the supervisor for everything. How much did you work with Jack Horner then on that film? Was there a bizarre split because you both were kind of in the dinosaur movement overseeing camp for the animations in Jurassic Park?
No, not really. I mean, I only, saw, Jack a couple of times. I mean, I'd seen him when he would come out to UC Berkeley. I'd hang out with a paleontologist and we'd go, drink beer. So I knew him from that. But he would only show up on the set a couple of times. I mean, there was one incident where when we did a bunch of tests, we created what we called the Dinosaur Bible. And that was a bunch of tests of walk cycles and different behavioral kind of patterns that we would use as kind of crossover. So I go back and forth with Stan Winston's studio, and we just make sure that as the scenes were being storyboarded and developed, that what each camp was doing would be able to work together continuity-wise. And let's see. I lost my train of thought there.
Oh, just going back and forth, interacting with Jack about.
Yeah, so we would do all of these tests and put them together and use that as the foundation for communicating. And then what I really wanted to do once we had that was get together with Gary Rydstrom, the sound designer, before we actually went into production, And so they bought, Gary's time in pre-production. I'd go over there with the Dinosaur Bible and run those shots for him, and then Gary would come up with the voices for particularly the raptors and the Tyrannosaurus, because like any animation movie, you want to record the actors first, so you have the voices, and the voice informs the character a lot. So that was really helpful, having those voices go into battle with.
Yeah. Now here's a great question for you. When you're coming up with that Dinosaur Bible and everybody's collaborating on it, how much of a conversation was there about dinosaur genitalia? About what does that look like? Is it going to be in the movie? Do we want to be realistic? What are we going for here?
Well, I mean, they didn't really, there were no sex scenes, and they're like ducks, or birds. You just don't see anything.
That's nice. Okay. Not even a conversation.
Nope.
All right. It works out. And so the legend is, that you, in the original Go Motion tests and Animatic, had the raptors kind of flicking their tongue in and out. And then Jack Horner said,
that's what I forgot. Yeah, so on the set with, Horner showed up one day, and we showed him that. And, I mean, from my mind, I'm always looking for different things that I can do, to goose things up. And so in some of the tests, I added this like little snake-like tongue flick. And, Horner just, he actually kind of went apoplectic on the set and said, they don't do that. They don't do that. That's what lizards do. But dinosaurs are birds. And we're like, hey, you know what? I read the script, and, Crichton said that they mixed, frog DNA with all that stuff. And it's a sci-fi movie. What are you talking about? But, Stephen wanted it to be legit, and he wanted them to be dinosaurs, not hybrids. And so, that was fine.
I noticed though in the film, there's still like when the raptors go down and looking at the ladle that Tim knocked off, like he does lick it a little bit. You still get a little raptor tongue action in there.
Yeah. It's not a snake though.
It's not the full snake. That's true. How well do you remember that scene, the raptor kitchen scene from Jurassic Park? I know you don't go back and watch it every night, but is it baked into your mind?
Well, it is by virtue of the fact that there's a tremendous amount of pre-planning that went into it.
Right.
And so once we were done, we'd done stop motion animatics of the entire scene. So it was just kind of like shooting like Hitchcock. It was just setting up the shots and shooting them and setting them up and shooting them. I mean, Spielberg and Kathy Kennedy, I think that there was like an issue with the budget, because Steven was a bad boy on Hook. And so the studio was really watching him. And if he went over budget, which was, I forget what it was, $55, $60 million, something like that, then he would have to forfeit his points. And so he made sure, he told the crew before going out, we're going to shoot this like a Clint Eastwood movie, and there's only going to be like one or two takes, so everybody's on point. And so when they shot it, they came in under their production schedule by a week or two, because they didn't have any money for the visual effects. It was about $5 million. And so what they did was they, were very crafty, and they banked the money that they saved by shooting really quickly, and that was the money that paid for the visual effects.
Yeah, hey, it works out. Okay, so with that kitchen sequence, was there a conversation about how much the raptors know? Because if you watch the film, it's always that thing of like the way they're kind of like slowly eyeing around. It's almost like they know these kids are in here already and they're just messing with them. Or was it in your mind, these are just on the hunt animals?
Well, at that point in time, that it looks like today it's kind of being refuted that the feeling was that the raptors were kind of like wolves and were pack animals. So if they were looking for food, they would, be wily. Their brains were pretty big, and they had like, big, eyes, were slightly, front facing. So they were, really, very well designed predators, and so they would do what they do and hunt.
Yeah. Okay. So they were just on the hunt. They weren't playing 4D chess or Holochess with the kids or anything in that kitchen. They knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Gotcha. The other scene, the T-Rex attack, it's still absolutely incredible. And there's one detail that I've always loved in Jurassic Park. When the T-Rex flips the Jeep over, bites the tire, and then like pulls back and then goes for the second bite. I know this is a very specific thing, but can you talk about just designing that sequence and the way the T-Rex interacts with the car?
Well, you always want to, add like little bits and, bits of business. I mean, initially, I was in with the very early script meetings with David Koepp, and there would be a bunch of things that, they kind of had me there for, because I was hired because my foot was in two camps. One, I understood how to mount a production like this with visual effects, and how to go about doing that effectively. And I also was kind of an amateur paleontologist and knew a lot about paleontology. So when we're in story meetings developing the script, Crichton on the page would have things like the Tyrannosaurus picks up the Jeep or whatever and shakes it like the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And you just point out, well, it can't do that because, the Tyrannosaurus weighs 3.5 tons and the Jeep almost weighs half of that. So there's no way he can pick it up and his jaws wouldn't fit around it and blah, blah, blah. And so, you would propose, what ifs, what if we use the natural behavior of the Tyrannosaur and had him do to the Jeep what he would do to an animal, and he would like bite it, he'd turn it over to get to the underbelly, and he would do what a Tyrannosaurus would do to try and immobilize the thing. And we even had a scene boarded that would have been really creepy, where he starts to drag the thing back into his lair. And as it was, I think we shot some of that. I don't remember, but Spielberg deemed it that the scene was getting so intense at that point that he kind of backed off because it was just getting creepier and creepier and creepier, and so he reached the perfect creepy level that he was satisfied with. And
yeah. Were you rooting for him to get creepier?
Yeah.
Were you rooting for him to get creepier? Or did you want him to push in that direction? Just like, let's just go all out. It's a monster movie.
I wasn't directing the movie, so
that's nice.
Like whatever Spielberg wanted. But you'd find things like when the lawyer gets killed initially in the script and the storyboard, the T-Rex is just like a train and just blasts through the thing with a lawyer sitting on the toilet. And, you assume the guy is dead. And we're there on the set and, go to, all of a sudden, I went to Steve and said, hey, you know what? We should have the dinosaur eat the guy. He goes, yeah, we should do that. And all the producers came out and went, well, that's not budgeted for, blah, 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 blah. And, I go like, hey, you know what? All you have to do is tilt the camera up. Just do a couple of takes, and tilt the camera up. And if you don't want to use them, you don't have to use them, but you have them because we're here. There's no downside to it. And knowing full well that, Stephen was going to do it. And what he and Kathy did all the time was they traded shots. Get everything, the budget, each shot had a specific number attached to it. And so he would move things around. He would cut a shot here that he felt that he didn't absolutely need in order to get a shot that he thought would be a lot better.
Yeah. And so then you got the shot and it turns out it wasn't too expensive and it's one of the highlights of the film.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you had to have it.
Yeah, I think the actor was upset that he died or something. Wasn't there something about he didn't think he was
knew
going...
he was going to die.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. How much time did you spend on the set of Jurassic Park? Do you have a most memorable, vivid memory from that era?
I was there for every dinosaur setup.
Wow.
With visual effects. I would go down, for, I went down for a number of rehearsals with Stan Winston's guys, to rehearse the behavior of the thing so that we would all be in continuity. But we weren't down, of course, when we were on the set, they would have the mechanical T-Rex or the mechanical raptors for some stuff, more like hand puppets for just the nose when the thing breathes on the glass, and some shots where its feet are walking. John Rosengrant played the raptor in those scenes. So, there was some crossover there, but that was about it.
Yeah. What do you remember the vibe of the set being like? Stressful, fun? How would you describe what you saw?
Oh, I mean, Spielberg, Lucas and Paul was a little bit more intense, but I got Verhoeven. I got along with him like really well. But I found that those guys, were really good creative managers, and I liken it to them being the conductor of a symphony orchestra. And when you're doing one of these things with bugs or space aliens or dinosaurs, you're kind of the equivalent of the first violin, because that's what the shows are about. And so they are extremely supportive and just make sure that you've got all you need to do the best job you can so that the show's as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah, that's nice. Is anything stand out from being on the set that would be a surprise to us? Any moments that were more difficult than you thought they'd be that people might not expect?
No, not. I mean, the only impediment really was Hurricane Aniki that came and wiped out, the island.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of shut everything down for a long time. And we had to go back and try and find some other locations to shoot some stuff. But,
right. There was originally supposed to be a baby Triceratops in the film. Did you have much interaction with that? Was that fully Stan Winston's team and less on your team?
Yeah, that maquette was made of that, but that got nixed pretty quickly in the storyboarding process.
Do you remember anything else that was cut early on that you were ramping up for?
No, that's the only thing I remember.
Okay, gotcha. So the dinosaur input device, which was the physical machine that you would use to help animate these scenes. So with a dinosaur input device, I mean, are those shots for the T-Rex attack and the shots for the raptors in the kitchen, are those fully your animators then working on that? Or was it just something that was a cool piece of tech that you tried for a while, but it wasn't too practical? Like, how much of the shots in Jurassic Park were hand animated like that with the physical object?
All of them.
All of it.
Yeah. I think except for one. There was one shot in the Tyrannosaurus paddock that I think Steve Williams did. For some reason, I don't remember why it had to be. There was some technical reason for it that was just difficult for us to do. And
did you think that was going to be a future for a while, a transition period for the industry of moving towards CG? Is you'd have kind of this stop motion, go motion?
No, it became pretty clear really early on that it was really kind of an interim thing. It was kind of like go motion. It was something that would, have a function for a little while. But, the computer guys at ILM weren't really up to speed in doing these kind of movies, and stop motion guys were. It's a whole different ball game for, the kind of things you have to pay attention to, like weight and mass and center of gravity. And, they were schooled in doing more like Disney, like so-called classic cartoon animation. And, so yeah, it's just a totally different deal. I mean, we went on and used it for some other projects for, Starship Troopers, when it was hard to find, competent computer graphics animators that could do that kind of stuff. We fall back and use those input devices. We had like bug input devices for troopers, and then there were some other movies that we worked on, smaller things. It lived on for a couple years after that, and then there were enough skilled computer graphics animators out there, and it became obsolete.
Yeah, they could roll with it. Do you wish that more computer animators would learn stop motion skills and kind of the history of animation? Do you still think it's important out there, or are they at a level now that it's just on its own?
No, I think they're pretty proficient now. There's no real reason to.
Sure. This is a very specific thing, but there's one Easter egg in Jurassic Park that I wanted to ask you about, where there's a shot of the raptor, kind of in the grand finale, the build up to the grand finale here, where it looks like there's like light coming through the vents, and I believe it's a CG raptor at this point, but you can see like A, G, C, and T just repeated, like the genetic code on this raptor, like that is the lighting coming through. Do you remember discussions about that? It's such a weird moment in that film.
Actually, honestly, I don't even remember. I kind of do now that you mentioned it, but no.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't think that was in the raptor kitchen. I think that was in a subsequent scene, wasn't it?
It was. Yep. It's before they crawl into the vents.
Yeah. So that was actually a projection onto one of Stan Winston's things.
Right. Okay. So I don't remember any discussions about just the Easter egg overall. But when's the last time you watched Jurassic Park?
I think when they came out with the stereoscopic version of it, whenever that was.
Oh, yeah. Was it like an event that you went to, like the opening, or did you go for fun?
Yeah, it was something down at the Academy Theater. I think it was the first screening. Yeah.
Nice. Do you enjoy watching those films?
I thought it was really good what they did. I mean, Jurassic Park holds up today.
Yeah. So just no interest in going back and watching them in your free time, but it's like, there's a big event. I'll go have some fun.
You see them so many times, I mean, not only, working on it, where you're pretty much just working on the scenes you're working on, but, then press junkets and film festivals and whatnot, people want you to watch it with them. So, I've seen it enough. And then, with my kids, when they were growing up, had to show it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. I've heard you talk in the past about just the issues of crunch in the industry. It's definitely something that the VFX industry shares with the video game industry overall, of just pushing it downstream, as you phrase it. Let other people worry about this issue instead of, letting the executives worry about it or people on the set. And I'm curious, like, how do you rectify that issue? How do you get more of a spotlight on VFX teams and the people that are busting their ass to make these things happen?
Well, that only usually comes about in as a result of a misinformed process, where either the producers and director really don't get it, So, but luckily, most of the movies I've worked on have been with pretty well-informed people. Only a very few projects where I've had to kind of deal with that.
Yeah. And imagine in some of those early projects too, it's just so exciting. I mean, you probably poured a fair amount of overtime into Star Wars and Jurassic Park, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you had to, I mean, particularly on Jurassic Park, because it was carving out such new ground. We really didn't know where we were. And so there was a lot of, not necessarily experimentation, but it was a really precipitous learning curve for everybody to get that stuff on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. And do you feel some of those thrills with Mad God? Do you feel like there's still a big learning curve in front of you?
No, not. It's a process, and it's totally different because I'm not shaping the thing like you would shape a normal movie. I mean, what's written is essentially a 12-page, 15-page outline that I worked from for like the last 30 years, and then. I storyboarded out like a bunch of the shots, but then I would do a lot of ad-libbing. You open a door, it leads to another door. And so I remain pretty flexible. I really like the originality that resulted from like Chaplin and Keaton's work, where they actually didn't work from scripts, and they would just go out and they would just improvise and build things up from nothing, from thin air. And that resulted in a really kind of a magical lightning in a box kind of a thing, where you're just on your toes trying to make something work, and not doing the normal just plug in and shooting the background plate that's kind of confined by a budget and whatnot. So it leaves you free to use your imagination to develop a scene or a shot, going into a shot. On that, God, that's a stop motion shot. I might have an idea about what I want to do, but I play kind of fast and loose and just get into it. And if I get another idea while I'm doing it, then I'll take that path. And sometimes that can be like a 90-degree turn.
Yeah. Well, hey, Phil Tippett, thank you for all of your hard work throughout the years. We really appreciate it on our end.
Oh, well, my pleasure.
Yeah. Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to get off your chest?
No, not really. Just, stay tuned for 2021, hopefully, when the coronavirus hopefully is checked by that point, and look out for the release of Mad God.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today, Phil.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thanks again to all of our Patreon supporters for letting this interview happen. If you enjoyed this interview, any support at patreon.com/MinnMax2ends could help us create more interviews like this in the future. You also unlock the podcast version and a bunch of other benefits if you check that out. Let us know in the comments, or you can tweet at me what you'd like to see from the interview show in the future. Do you want legends, up-and-comers, people from film, games, science? Really, it's an exciting time for us. The gates are wide open for who we can talk to, and it's all thanks again to your support at patreon.com/MinnMax. And there are 2 ends in MinnMax. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.